My name is Vanessa Carter. I'm 36 years old and I live in Chicago. Most people who look at me from the outside might think I have it all figured out. Good job, stable income, a nice apartment with skyline views. But what they don't see are the choices I've made and the sacrifices that have shaped my life, especially the ones I made for my family. Pauses, sighs as if speaking to a close friend. Before I take you deeper into my story, let me ask you something. Have you ever sacrificed your own dreams because of your family? If you know that feeling, then maybe you'll understand what I'm about to share. And before we go further, if you're here listening, please take a second to subscribe, like, and share this channel. Stories like mine are real, and your support helps us keep telling them. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a modest house that always smelled of fresh laundry and my mom's cinnamon rolls. My parents, Evelyn and Thomas Carter, worked harder than anyone I knew. Dad laid bricks and built homes until his back gave out. Mom taught at a public elementary school, pouring her patience into dozens of kids who weren't even her own. They weren't rich, but they were proud, and they drilled into me and my younger sister Rachel that family comes first. Always. That lesson stuck to me like glue. It became my compass. By the time I was in my 30s, I had climbed the ladder at a financial firm downtown. As a senior account manager, my days were long, filled with meetings, client calls, and market updates. But the paycheck was good. It gave me freedom, or at least it should have. Yet somehow that freedom always seemed to get rerouted back into my family's needs. 3 years ago, during my divorce, there was one asset that caused tension: the country house in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Just a 90-minute drive north of Chicago, it wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, a wide porch facing the lake, and 2 acres of quiet land where you could hear the wind before you saw the trees move. My ex-husband didn't want it. He was a city guy through and through, so the house became mine. At first, I thought about selling it right away. I dreamed of buying a sleek condo closer to work, maybe in River North or even near Magnificent Mile. I even went apartment hunting, picturing myself sipping wine on a balcony overlooking the city lights. It felt within reach. But when I mentioned the idea at Sunday dinner, my mother's fork froze midair. "Sell the house?" she said, her eyes wide. "Vanessa, no, that's our family place. Think of the memories we could create there. Holidays, barbecues, grandchildren someday." Rachel chimed in with a laugh. "Yeah, Vanessa, it could be our retreat. Don't you want us to have one place that belongs to all of us?" I remember setting my fork down, feeling like a selfish child just for wanting something of my own. Mom reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "Please, honey, do this for me." Those words cut through me. I've always been the type who can't say no to my mother, especially when she softens her voice like that. So I caved. I kept the house, but it wasn't without cost. To hold on to both the Lake Geneva house and still live in Chicago, I had to take on a mortgage for my apartment. Instead of owning a place outright, I signed myself up for monthly payments I didn't need. It was my choice, yes, but one made under the heavy weight of guilt and obligation. And it didn't stop there. The sacrifices piled up, little by little, like the time my college friend Jess invited me on a 2-week trip to Italy, Rome, Florence, Venice, the works. I wanted so badly to go, I had even started looking at flights. But when Mom casually mentioned she and Dad wanted to redo the deck at Lake Geneva for the family's sake, I canceled my plans, handed over a chunk of my savings, and watched my dream trip dissolve. Or the time a colleague from work, a sweet guy named Mark, asked me out to dinner. It wasn't the first time he had shown interest, but I said no. Not because I didn't want to go, but because Rachel had called me earlier in tears, saying she was short on rent. I spent the evening transferring money to her account instead of dressing up and letting myself be cared for, even for just one night. Looking back, I can see how much of myself I was giving away, piece by piece. At the time, though, I told myself it was love, it was duty, it was what a good daughter and sister did. I didn't complain. I didn't even allow myself to feel resentful. Each time I tucked away my disappointment and convinced myself it was worth it because my family was happy. And truthfully, there were moments when it did feel worth it. Family weekends at the Lake Geneva house could be magical. Dad grilling on the porch, Rachel playing music on her phone, Mom fussing over table settings, everyone laughing as the sun set over the lake. I'd watch them and think, this is why I did it. This is why I said yes. But beneath that surface happiness, I started noticing something. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. I was the one paying for it, but when I arrived on certain weekends, Rachel and her boyfriend Daniel were already there, settled in like it was their private getaway. Sometimes my parents would invite relatives without even telling me. I'd walk into my own home and feel like a guest. Still, I kept quiet. I told myself not to ruin the peace. After all, wasn't this what I wanted? To give my family a place where they could gather, where they could feel joy? What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have imagined, was just how far they would take advantage of me. At that point, I believed every sacrifice was building love and trust. I believed I was holding my family together. I couldn't see that what I was really doing was weaving a safety net for them, with ropes made from my own dreams. And soon, that net would turn into a noose. This was my beginning, the part where I thought my sacrifices meant something. I didn't yet know the truth waiting around the corner, but it wouldn't be long before I stumbled upon it, and when I did, everything I believed about family, loyalty, and love would shatter. When I finally agreed to keep the Lake Geneva house, I thought I was preserving a sanctuary, a place where my family could come together and feel close. I believed it would strengthen our bond, like glue holding us all in one piece. But it didn't take long for that vision to unravel. At first, it seemed innocent. My parents drove up on weekends, sitting on the porch with their morning coffee, telling me how grateful they were. I told myself their smiles made the extra mortgage worth it. "This place feels alive again, thanks to you," Dad said once, patting my shoulder. His words warmed me, but even then, something gnawed at me. The way he said thanks to you almost felt like because of you, we can have this for free. Then Rachel and her boyfriend, Daniel, began visiting more often. What started as an occasional getaway turned into a routine. I'd check the security cameras and see their cars parked in the driveway, sometimes for days. One Friday night, I called Rachel just to check in. "Hey, are you at the house again?" She laughed like it was obvious. "Of course. Daniel loves it out here. It's our little escape. You don't mind, do you? I mean, you're barely here anyway." I wanted to say I did mind, that it was still my property, but I swallowed the words. Instead, I said softly, "No, I don't mind." And just like that, my house became theirs. The gatherings grew bigger. Holidays, birthdays, random weekends, they always seemed to revolve around Lake Geneva. I'd get texts after the fact, photos of cousins splashing in the lake, or aunts grilling on the porch, parties I hadn't even known were happening. Once, I drove up unannounced on a Saturday. The driveway was lined with cars I didn't recognize. Music boomed from the backyard. As I walked around, I saw my Aunt Margaret flipping burgers, kids running barefoot on the grass, Rachel mixing drinks for a circle of friends. When she spotted me, her eyes widened. "Vanessa, you made it!" She sounded surprised, like I was the guest and not the homeowner. I tried to smile. "Looks like quite the party." "Yeah, isn't it great? Mom invited everyone. You don't mind, right?" Her question stung. You don't mind, right? Always a question, always a push, and always the expectation that my answer would be yes. Inside, I noticed something else. The pantry was nearly empty, my wine rack half drained. Towels, dishes, even bedding had been used, scattered everywhere. It looked less like a family retreat and more like an Airbnb I was running for free. Still, when Mom caught me frowning, she clasped my hand and whispered, "Don't be upset, honey. This is what you wanted, isn't it? A house for family." I nodded, because saying no felt impossible. But the imbalance weighed on me. While they lounged at the lake, I was the one working late nights in Chicago, covering my mortgage, paying utilities, and ensuring the place stayed maintained. Security systems, lawn care, repairs, every bill had my name on it, yet the joy they soaked up there never seemed to include me. One evening, After a long day at work, I sat on my apartment balcony overlooking the city, wine glass in hand, scrolling through social media. Rachel had posted another picture, her and Daniel in front of a bonfire at the lake house, tagged with #family retreat #blessed. I laughed bitterly. Family retreat? Blessed? I was the only one making it possible, and yet I wasn't even invited. The turning point came when Dad casually mentioned they'd had a 4th of July barbecue. "You should have seen the fireworks from the porch," he said cheerfully on the phone. "Best view in town." I froze. "Wait, you had a barbecue?" "Yeah, your mom invited some friends. Oh, and Daniel's parents came too, nice folks. You should meet them." I hung up feeling hollow. They hadn't even told me. They had hosted guests of guests at my house without so much as a text. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when my generosity had turned into entitlement. When had the house I worked for become everyone's playground but mine? And yet every time I considered drawing boundaries, my chest tightened with guilt. I heard Mom's voice in my head, "Please, honey, do this for me." So I let it continue. Weeks blurred into months. Lake Geneva buzzed with life most weekends, life that rarely included me. The house was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and music, but in Chicago, my apartment felt silent, my sacrifices invisible. I told myself it was fine, that family happiness was worth more than solitude or missed vacations. But deep down, a quiet resentment brewed. Looking back, I realized this was the calm before the storm. This was the part where I thought I was just being a good daughter, a good sister. I didn't know then that the very people filling my house with laughter were sharpening knives behind my back. And soon, I'd hear exactly what they thought of me, words I can never unhear. The weeks rolled on, each one blurring into the next. My job consumed me, long hours spent buried under spreadsheets and endless calls. In some ways, the grind was a relief. It gave me an excuse not to think too hard about how my house had slowly turned into everyone's playground but mine. That Friday morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. The firm's quarterly management meeting was scheduled, the kind where every senior manager had to sit through hours of presentations, defending budgets and performance charts under the harsh glare of the executive board. I hated those meetings. I'd spent the entire week preparing my talking points, rehearsing them in front of the mirror, and yet I still felt like a kid walking into detention. By 8:30 a.m., I was already in my office, flipping nervously through my notes. My phone buzzed. It was an internal call from my boss, Mr. Whitman. "Vanessa," he said, his voice surprisingly casual. "The meeting's off. Both the director and deputy director are down with the flu. We're postponing until next week." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "Wait, the whole meeting? Canceled?" "Yep," he chuckled. "Consider it a gift. Why don't you take the afternoon off? Nothing pressing today. You've earned it." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. The tension in my shoulders melted away like ice under the sun. A canceled meeting, no endless questions, no pressure. Just a wide-open afternoon staring back at me. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, letting it sink in. Free time was rare in my world, almost a luxury. My mind immediately began to wander. What would I do with it? A nap? Shopping? Maybe even dinner with Jess, who had been begging me to meet up? Then, almost out of nowhere, a thought slipped in. They're at Lake Geneva today. I remembered my mother mentioning earlier that week that they had a small family gathering planned for Friday. She'd said it so breezily, like I was automatically excluded. "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll have fun without you." Her words had pricked me, though I'd brushed them off at the time. Now, with my afternoon suddenly free, the idea of surprising them took root in my mind. I pictured walking into the kitchen, arms full of pastries from my favorite downtown bakery, the look of delight on Mom's face, Rachel squealing, Dad grinning. For once, I wanted to see their joy when I showed up unannounced. Maybe it would remind me that the sacrifices I made weren't in vain. The thought warmed me enough to push aside my hesitation. I grabbed my coat and bag, deciding to stop by La Pâtisserie, a little French bakery near the office. The place smelled of butter and sugar the moment I stepped inside. Rows of golden croissants and delicate fruit tarts lined the glass case. I ordered an assortment: chocolate croissants, lemon tarts, cookies dusted with powdered sugar, the kind of treats guaranteed to win smiles. Carrying the white pastry box, tied neatly with a ribbon, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a while: anticipation. By noon, I was on the road, heading north. The drive from Chicago to Lake Geneva was familiar, the skyline fading into suburbs, then rolling fields and stretches of green. With every mile, my excitement grew. I imagined Mom hugging me, telling me how thoughtful I was. Maybe Rachel would even say thank you for once. But beneath the excitement, a quieter feeling stirred: nervousness. I couldn't shake the sense that I was intruding, even though it was my house. That thought gnawed at me, but I forced myself to focus on the pastries on the seat beside me, the ribbon bobbing with every bump in the road. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, my breath caught. The house was lit up, cars lined the yard, my parents' old sedan, Rachel's compact, Daniel's SUV, and several others I didn't recognize. Laughter floated through the walls, spilling out into the evening air. I killed the engine, sitting in silence for a moment. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I tried to steady the rush of emotions swirling inside me. "This is good," I told myself. "They're happy. You're about to surprise them. This will be worth it." I picked up the pastry box and stepped out of the car, careful to close the door quietly. Gravel crunched under my shoes. The porch light glowed warmly, guiding me forward. I slid my key into the front door, turning it slowly so it wouldn't click. My heart raced, not with fear, but with the thrill of catching them off guard. From inside, voices rose in unison, laughter spilling through the hallway. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I pushed the door open, ready to walk into their arms, to finally feel like part of the family retreat I had sacrificed so much for. But what I heard next made my blood run cold. I stepped into the house as quietly as I could, clutching the pastry box to my chest like a peace offering. The hallway smelled faintly of vanilla candles and grilled meat, familiar yet strangely foreign. I could hear laughter spilling from the living room, voices overlapping in a way that sounded almost musical. For a second I froze, smiling despite myself. They're happy. I'm about to surprise them. I took 2 steps forward, then stopped. Through the archway, I could see just a sliver of the living room. My mom, Evelyn, sat on the couch, a glass of red wine in her hand, cheeks flushed from the alcohol. My dad, Thomas, leaned back in an armchair, one leg crossed over the other like he owned the place. Rachel and Daniel stood near the fireplace, Rachel gesturing dramatically as she spoke. My Aunt Margaret and Uncle Stephen were perched on the love seat, and across from them were 2 older people I didn't immediately recognize until I saw Daniel's arm draped around his fiancée's shoulders. His parents, they're here too. I should have walked in then, announced myself, handed over the pastries. That was the plan. But just as I opened my mouth, I caught my mother's voice, sharp, distinct over the chatter. "I swear, Vanessa is just so incredibly dumb sometimes." The room erupted with laughter. I froze, every muscle in my body locked, like I'd walked straight into an ice bath. Did I just hear that right? Mom sipped her wine, her tone casual, almost amused. "She does whatever we tell her, like a little puppet on strings. It's almost too easy." Rachel chimed in, her voice bright and mocking. "Oh, you should have seen her last month when I told her I was short on rent again. I barely even had to fake the tears. She Venmo'd me $800 before I could finish the story." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Seriously? That easy?" "Every time," Rachel smirked. "She thinks helping me makes her the good big sister. Honestly, it's hilarious." The laughter swelled, filling the room, filling my ears until I felt dizzy. My grip on the pastry box slipped, and it tilted dangerously. I scrambled to catch it, the paper rustling loudly. For a terrifying second, I thought they'd heard me. My heart pounded against my ribs as I pressed my back to the wall, holding my breath. But no one came to check. Their laughter drowned out everything. Then my Aunt Margaret's voice rang out. "That reminds me, remember when I told her I needed $2,000 for an emergency root canal? She didn't even ask for proof, just wired me the money the next day." Someone asked, laughing, So did you even go to the dentist? Margaret grinned. Please, I bought that gorgeous sectional for my living room. Vanessa, basically redecorated my house for me. More laughter. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from gasping. Uncle Stephen joined in, proud. Last summer, I told her my car needed $1,500 in repairs. She handed it over, no questions. Guess what I really bought? A fishing boat. Best decision I ever made. The group clinked glasses, toasting his brilliance, and then my father's voice, calm and deliberate. You know, having a family member like Vanessa is better than winning the lottery. She's like our personal ATM, no fees, no interest, and no accountability. My mom leaned forward, nodding eagerly. Exactly. She never even asks for the money back. Not once. Just hands it over like she's some kind of charity. Honestly, it's pathetic. The word pathetic sliced through me sharper than a knife. Rachel's laughter rose above the rest. Don't forget the house itself. Remember how she was dead set on selling it after her divorce? We just played the family card, told her how much it meant to us, and poof, she kept it. Took on a mortgage in Chicago so we could keep using this place for free. Dad raised his glass again. Here's to Vanessa, the gift that keeps on giving. They clinked glasses, a chorus of mock cheers echoing through my own home. I stood there, trembling, the pastry box slipping from my hands at last. It hit the hardwood with a dull thud, the ribbons snapping, croissants spilling out across the floor. I scrambled to gather them, but my hands were shaking too violently. One chocolate croissant crumbled in my palm, smearing across my fingers. Still, nobody noticed. They were too busy laughing at me. I wanted to scream, to storm into the room and throw the ruined pastries in their smug faces. But something rooted me to the floor. The need to hear it all, every poisonous word. That's when Daniel's father spoke for the first time, his tone smug. You all don't know how lucky you are. Most people have to beg banks for loans. You've got Vanessa, reliable, generous, never says no. If I were you, I'd never let her figure out what's really going on. My mom leaned in conspiratorially. Don't worry, she won't. And I've been thinking about our next big ask. My stomach dropped. Rachel giggled nervously. Oh, Mom, don't. No, listen, Mom insisted. The engagement party is just the start. We can easily get 5, maybe 10,000 from her if we guilt her into covering catering and decorations. After that, the wedding itself. Minimum 20 grand. And once that's over, well, maybe Daniel will need a new car for commuting, or Rachel will need capital to start her boutique. We'll phrase it as family investing in family. She'll eat it up. Daniel's mother raised her eyebrows but said nothing. His father chuckled approvingly. Ambitious. I like it. Rachel tossed her hair, smirking. Trust me, it'll work. She hates saying no. She still feels guilty about the divorce, like she owes us something. She's the perfect mark. Perfect mark. The words echoed in my ears, louder than their laughter, louder than the ringing in my head. Then, as if the cruelty hadn't already cut deep enough, my mom added the final twist of the knife. And let's be real, what else is she going to do with her money? It's not like she has a husband or kids. She's alone. She needs us. Without family, she's nothing. The room roared with laughter. Glasses clinked again. I felt my knees buckle. I crouched down, clutching the ruined pastry box to steady myself, my vision blurred with tears. In that moment, something inside me cracked. All the sacrifices, all the times I told myself it was worth it, the canceled vacations, the lonely nights, the mortgage payments, the hours spent working overtime so I could keep both homes. None of it mattered. To them, I wasn't generous. I wasn't kind. I was stupid. I was an ATM with legs. And they didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I could give them. I stayed crouched there for what felt like forever, listening as they made one final toast. To stupid relatives with money, someone said cheerfully. And to Vanessa, Mom added, raising her glass with a wicked smile. Our golden goose. The sound of clinking glasses rang in my ears like funeral bells. I couldn't bear another second. I staggered backward, careful not to let my shoes squeak on the floorboards. My breath came in shallow gasps. Somehow, I managed to slip back out the front door without a sound. Outside, the cool Wisconsin evening air hit me like a slap. My chest heaved as I stumbled toward my car, pastries crushed in my trembling hands. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there, shaking. Tears streamed down my face unchecked, dripping onto the steering wheel. I started the engine, backing out slowly so they wouldn't hear. As the driveway disappeared in my rearview mirror, one thought replayed in my head, over and over like a drumbeat. They think I'm nothing. They think I'm a fool. But they're wrong. The drive back to Chicago felt endless. My headlights carved 2 narrow tunnels through the dark highway, but everything outside them blurred. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached, yet I barely noticed. My body was on autopilot, but my mind kept replaying the words I had just heard. She's pathetic. Our golden goose. Perfect mark. Each phrase echoed louder than the next, as if they were carved into my skull. By the time I reached River North, it was close to midnight. I parked the car and trudged upstairs, clutching the pastry box like some broken relic. When I unlocked my apartment door, the silence inside hit me harder than their laughter had. No voices, no clinking glasses, no family, just me. I set the pastry box on the kitchen counter. The ribbon was torn, the croissants crushed, one of them smeared with chocolate across the cardboard. I stared at it for a long time before my legs gave out. I slid down to the floor, my back against the cabinet, and the tears finally came. They weren't polite tears. They were jagged, choking sobs that left me gasping for air. My chest felt like it was splitting open, my hands clawing at the fabric of my sweater as if I could hold myself together physically when my heart had already cracked wide open. How could they? I whispered into the empty room, my voice hoarse. How could they do this to me? I thought about the trips I never took, the nights I said no to dates, the thousands of dollars I'd quietly wired away without question. I thought about the mortgage I should never have had to take on, the sacrifices I'd made that nobody asked for but everybody demanded. And all of it. For what? For them to sit in my house and laugh at me like I was some pathetic fool. The more I cried, the more the grief twisted into something sharper. My tears slowed, my breathing steadied, and the raw ache in my chest began to burn. Rage, slow, heavy, molten, settled deep in my stomach. I dragged myself off the floor and stumbled to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, watching my reflection tremble in the mirror. My eyes were red, swollen, unrecognizable. But behind the blotches and the tears, I saw something else flickering. Anger. Pathetic? I muttered at the woman staring back at me. No, not pathetic. Not anymore. I gripped the edge of the sink until my fingers turned white. My mother's voice rang again in my head. Please, honey, do this for me. The tone that once softened me now curdled into poison. Every memory of her pleading eyes, of Dad's cheerful thanks, of Rachel's fake tears. It all looked different now. It wasn't love. It was manipulation, polished over years until it felt like duty. The fury surged stronger. I stormed back into the living room, pacing like a caged animal. Thoughts crashed into each other. Part of me wanted to call them right then, to scream into the phone, to spit their words back at them. Another part of me wanted to drive straight back to Lake Geneva, rip the glasses out of their smug hands, and shout the truth in their faces. But underneath the rage, a calmer voice whispered, "Not yet. Don't give them that satisfaction." I froze mid-step, that thought settling over me like a cold blanket. Not yet. That was the moment I realized. I didn't just want to confront them. I wanted them to feel what I felt. Betrayed, powerless, humiliated. A quick argument wouldn't do. I needed something that would last. The anger crystallized into resolve. I grabbed a notebook from my desk and flipped it open, scribbling furiously. Dates, expenses, memories, every time I'd said yes to them. Every sacrifice, every transfer. Seeing it all in black ink filled me with both shame and clarity. I had been funding their joy while they stripped me of mine. I slammed the pen down, my breath ragged. "Never again," I whispered. The city outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that only makes loneliness louder. I pulled the blanket from my couch, wrapped it around my shoulders, and sat staring out the window at the skyline. Lights glittered against the dark, each one a reminder that people out there were living their lives, making choices for themselves. And here I was, in the middle of mine, finally ready to make a choice of my own. Tears welled up again, but they weren't the same as before. They weren't of grief anymore. They were of release. Each one felt like a piece of the weight sliding off my chest, making space for something new, something sharper. I pressed my palms together, almost like a prayer. "They think I'm a fool," I said softly, "but they're about to learn how wrong they are." That night I barely slept. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with fragments of plans. I didn't know exactly how I would make them pay, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would. The golden goose was done laying eggs, and soon the hunters would find themselves trapped in their own snare. Morning light bled through my blinds, sharp and intrusive. I hadn't slept more than an hour. My body felt heavy, but my mind buzzed, replaying the laughter, the toasts, the word pathetic. By the time my phone buzzed, I almost expected it. The caller ID lit up. Mom. I stared at it, lips curling into a humorless smile. Right on schedule. I let it ring twice before answering, forcing a warmth into my voice. "Hey, Mom." Her tone was syrupy sweet. "Vanessa, sweetheart, I have the most wonderful news. Rachel and Daniel are engaged. He proposed last night with the most beautiful ring. Isn't that exciting?" I pressed my hand against my mouth to hide the bitter laugh clawing its way out. "Exciting? After what I heard you plan for me?" Instead, I said softly, "That's wonderful, Mom. I'm happy for them." I could practically hear her exhale in relief, like she'd feared I might not play along. Then she cleared her throat, slipping into that familiar, practiced tone, the one she used whenever she was about to ask for something big. "So, listen," she began. "We'd like to throw an engagement party for them. Something really special. Catering, decorations, the works. Of course, we were thinking of having it at the Lake Geneva house. It's perfect for this, don't you agree?" I let silence stretch just long enough to make her nervous. The house is always available for family." Good, she rushed on. "There's just one tiny problem. We're, well, a little short on funds right now." There it was, the ask. I leaned against the counter, gripping it until my knuckles whitened, but kept my voice even. "How much?" Her sigh was dramatic, the kind meant to tug at my heart. "About 5,000 should cover everything. The food, flowers, a cake. I know it's a lot, but Rachel only gets engaged once. You understand, don't you?" My pulse hammered in my ears. 5,000, exactly what they'd plotted. I swallowed my rage, smoothed it into silk. "Wow, that's a lot," I said, feigning hesitation. "I wish I could, but things are tight right now. Some unexpected expenses." Panic edged her voice. "Well, what if your father and I, along with Rachel and Daniel, put everything on our cards first and you just paid us back later? That way the party won't suffer." I bit back a laugh. They were so predictable it was almost comical. I forced a small sigh as if I were conceding. "That might work. You know me, Mom. I want Rachel's day to be perfect. If you cover it up front, I'll make sure you're paid back." Her relief was immediate, almost giddy. "Oh, Vanessa, you're an angel. I'll call the caterer this afternoon. Rachel will be thrilled." Thrilled that she thinks I've taken the bait, I thought. Out loud, I said, "I'm glad I can help. This party is going to be unforgettable." I could almost see her smile through the phone, oblivious to the venom laced in my promise. After we hung up, I stood in my quiet kitchen, the phone still in my hand. For years, their manipulations had worked because I wanted to believe in their gratitude. I wanted to believe love was behind their requests. Now that the veil was lifted, their tricks seemed almost pitiful. But this wasn't just about saying no anymore. It wasn't about finally refusing a handout. It was about flipping the script. I grabbed my notebook again, flipping to the page I'd scrawled on the night before. Beneath the long list of sacrifices, I began sketching out something new. A plan. Step 1. Let them think I was on the hook. Step 2. Wait for them to invest their money and pride into the engagement party. Step 3. Take it all away. The thought made my chest tighten, not with guilt, but with a strange, dangerous thrill. For once, I wouldn't be the fool. For once, they would be the ones left standing in the cold. That evening, I made a call of my own to a locksmith in Lake Geneva. "Yes, Ms. Carter," the man said. "We can replace every lock in the house. Front, back, side entry. When would you like this done?" I pictured my family bustling around, stringing up lights, hanging banners, confident in their control of me. The image hardened my resolve. "Friday evening," I said. "Late, around 7. I need it done before Saturday morning." "Consider it done." After I hung up, I leaned back, closing my eyes. The first piece of my trap was set. Over the next few days, I played my role to perfection. I answered calls from Mom with cheerful agreement. I sent Rachel a congratulatory text full of emojis. When Daniel left me a voicemail saying thanks, I even returned it with a polite, "Of course, anything for you both." Every word was a performance, but behind the mask, my mind sharpened like a blade. At night, I lay awake, picturing their faces when the keys wouldn't work. I pictured Rachel's smile crumbling, Mom's voice turning from smug to panicked. I pictured Daniel's parents watching the scene unfold, realizing just how entitled this family really was. The fantasy didn't erase the hurt of their betrayal, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in years: power. By Friday afternoon, I knew they'd already arrived at Lake Geneva to decorate. I stayed in Chicago, calm, sipping coffee while my phone buzzed with group messages about tablecloth colors and flower arrangements. When the locksmith called to confirm his arrival, I smiled for the first time all week. "Perfect," I told him. "You're right on time." The game had begun, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the puppet. I was the one holding the strings. Friday evening came wrapped in a storm of nerves and adrenaline. By the time I left Chicago, the sun was already dipping low, casting long streaks of orange over the highway. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove north toward Lake Geneva, my stomach coiled in knots. This wasn't just another trip to the lake house. This was the beginning of the end. The locksmith's van was already waiting when I pulled into the gravel driveway. The yard glowed faintly under the string lights my family had hung earlier that day. From a distance, the house looked festive, like it was holding its breath for celebration. Up close, it felt like a set for a play I'd no longer agreed to star in. The locksmith, a middle-aged man named Frank with kind eyes, greeted me with a polite nod. "Evening, Ms. Carter. You wanted every lock changed?" "Yes," I said firmly, pressing the keys into his palm. "Every single one. Front door, back door, side entrance, garage. I don't want a single old key to work tomorrow." He studied me for a moment, as if he sensed the weight behind my request, but didn't pry. "No problem. Give me about an hour." While Frank worked, drilling and fitting the new locks, I stepped inside. The sight stopped me cold. The living room was drenched in color, streamers of gold and white dangling from the ceiling, a banner stretched across the mantel. "Congratulations, Rachel and Daniel." Balloons hovered in every corner, tied in neat clusters. A table had been arranged with elegant linen, candles waiting to be lit. The scent of roses lingered in the air from the centerpieces, perched proudly on every surface. For a moment, my chest tightened, not with longing, but with a painful recognition. This was what they'd built on my back, with my silence and my money. A false shrine to family, erected in the house I'd given up so much for. I reached up, tugged at one of the streamers, and watched it tear with a satisfying rip. One by one, I dismantled it all. I yanked the banner down first, the letters crumpling in my fists. The balloons came next. Each one I popped with a sharp twist of my car key, the rubber snapping with tiny explosions that echoed in the empty house. With every pop, I felt something inside me loosen. I swept the carefully arranged roses off the dining table, petals scattering across the floor like confetti at a funeral. The candles, the folded napkins, the polished silverware, I shoved them all into black garbage bags. By the time Frank poked his head in to tell me he was nearly done, I was sweating, strands of hair sticking to my face. He glanced at the wreckage behind me, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Big changes, huh?" he asked cautiously. I managed a tight smile. "You could say that. Just cleaning house." He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I was saying, then returned to finish the locks. When he left, handing me the fresh set of keys, I walked back through the rooms alone. The decorations were gone, replaced by garbage bags lined up like corpses at the edge of the driveway. I paused in the living room, breathing hard, my eyes sweeping the stripped space. Without the balloons and flowers, the house looked bare, but not sad. For the first time in years, it felt like mine again. I dropped into one of the chairs, the silence thick around me. My hands trembled, not with weakness this time, but with the release of something old and toxic. "This isn't your altar anymore," I whispered into the empty room. "This house doesn't belong to you." My voice echoed faintly, and for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of talking to no one. I carried the garbage bags to the corner of the yard, where they would be impossible to miss. I left them there like monuments to the lies I'd torn down. Tomorrow, my family would arrive expecting perfection, expecting me to fall in line like I always had. Instead, they'd find the shredded remains of their illusion piled in black plastic. The thought steadied me. As I locked the front door behind me, my new lock, my new key, I slipped the cold metal into my pocket and felt its weight. It was more than a key now, it was a declaration. I stood for a long moment in the driveway, the night pressing in around me. The string lights my family had strung up still twinkled above, swaying gently in the wind, unaware that the party they promised to illuminate would never begin. Finally, I got into my car. My reflection in the rearview mirror caught my eye. My face flushed, streaked with sweat and dust, but my eyes clear, fierce. "Tomorrow," I said softly to myself, "they'll learn." I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life. As I drove back toward Chicago, I didn't feel the ache of betrayal as I had before. Tonight, I'd buried the old Vanessa, the obedient daughter, the forgiving sister, the endless ATM. In her place, someone new had emerged, someone ready to sever the last tie. Saturday morning, Chicago felt unusually calm. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee steaming in my hands, the skyline glittering beyond the window. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from Mom, Rachel, even Aunt Margaret, little updates about flowers being delivered, tables being set, the caterer arriving. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I opened my home security app. The live feed from Lake Geneva popped onto my screen. The front porch, the driveway, the backyard. My heart raced, not from fear anymore, but from anticipation. By noon, cars began to roll up the gravel drive. My parents' old sedan, Rachel's little silver hatchback, Daniel's sleek black SUV. Then came cars I didn't recognize. Daniel's parents, aunts, uncles, a few well-dressed friends. I even spotted a man in a crisp navy suit I guessed was Daniel's boss. Perfect. The audience was bigger than I'd hoped. From my kitchen in Chicago, I watched them gather at the front door, arms full of dishes, bags, floral arrangements. Mom led the way, her voice carrying faintly even through the microphone. "Rachel, hold these centerpieces steady. Careful. We'll get them right on the dining table." She slid her key into the lock, turned it, jiggled it, paused, tried again. Click. Nothing. Her brow furrowed. She tried once more, then pulled the key out, staring at it as if it had betrayed her. "Tom," she called over her shoulder, "come try this. The lock's acting strange." Dad stepped forward, jingled his own key ring, shoved another key in. He twisted harder. Nothing. Rachel shifted nervously, glancing at the guests. "What's going on? The caterer's going to be here any second." Daniel tried next, his tone irritated. "This lock is jammed. Do you guys even maintain this place?" I leaned closer to the phone screen, biting back a laugh. The caterer's van pulled up just as Mom turned around, flustered. The driver, a young woman with tattoos up her arms, unloaded trays of food, looking confused at the huddle of overdressed guests standing in the driveway. "Where should I set these?" she asked. Mom forced a smile, her voice brittle. "Just hold on a moment. We're having a little issue with the door." The guests murmured, shuffling awkwardly, their heels sinking into the gravel. Daniel's mother tugged at her husband's sleeve, whispering something that made him scowl. Rachel's cheeks flushed bright red. That was when I saw my father's patience snap. He yanked at the knob, rattling the door with brute force. Damn thing stuck. Maybe the wood swelled from the humidity. He glanced back at the crowd. "We'll get it open." He rammed his shoulder against the door. The frame shook. The guests gasped. Then, the shrill wail of the alarm system split the air. The sound blasted through the speakers on my phone, making me flinch even from Chicago. My parents staggered back, covering their ears. The caterer dropped one of her trays. It hit the gravel, scattering canapes across the ground. Chaos erupted. Rachel spun on my mother. "What the hell is happening, Mom?" "I don't know," Mom shrieked, fumbling with her phone. "Vanessa must have changed something with the system. I'll call her." My screen lit up instantly. Incoming call, Mom. I sipped my coffee, let it buzz, and watched them panic. When the call went to voicemail, Dad bellowed, "Vanessa, open this damn door right now!" He pounded on the wood so hard, the decorations taped to the porch rattled. Rachel was near tears, her mascara beginning to streak. "All my friends are here. Daniel's boss is here. You can't embarrass me like this." Daniel muttered something under his breath, pulling out his phone as if ready to call a locksmith. His father shook his head, face tight with disapproval. The alarm still screamed. Guests covered their ears. Neighbors began drifting closer, watching the scene unfold. I let them suffer for another 2 minutes before finally answering Mom's second call. "Vanessa!" she shouted before I could even say hello. "Thank God! We can't get into the house. Something's wrong with the locks." "Nothing's wrong," I interrupted calmly, swirling my coffee. "I had them changed yesterday." Silence, the kind that thickens the air. You what?" Mom stammered. "I changed the locks," I repeated, my tone as casual as if I were discussing the weather. "But why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" I let a beat pass. Then, softly, "Because I heard you. All of you. That night, a month ago. Every word." I swear I could hear the collective inhale of everyone gathered outside my home. Mom's voice wavered. "Sweetheart, you must have misunderstood." "Really?" I cut in. "So I didn't hear Rachel brag about scamming rent money out of me? Or Aunt Margaret admitting she spent my emergency loan on a new sofa? Or Dad calling me an ATM with no fees? Should I go on?" Rachel's voice broke through the speaker, shrill and panicked. "Vanessa, stop this! You're making a scene!" "No," I said, my voice hard now. "You made the scene. I'm just letting everyone watch it play out." The alarm blared in the background until I tapped my phone, silencing it remotely. Gasps of relief echoed from the crowd. But I wasn't finished. I toggled the app to my camera feed and hit share. Within seconds, the screen recording broadcast the live footage to my social media account, private, but followed by coworkers, friends, and distant relatives. On my laptop nearby, I saw the viewer count tick upward, 10, 20, 50, climbing fast. Into the phone, I said, "Smile, everyone, you're live." Rachel screamed, "You wouldn't dare!" "Oh, but I would." My voice was calm, steady, because while you were toasting to stupid relatives with money, I was standing in the hallway. I heard everything, and now so can the world. The guests shifted uneasily, whispers rising. Daniel's boss muttered something to him and walked briskly back to his car. His mother looked mortified, tugging at her pearls. Mom's voice cracked, desperation creeping in. "Vanessa, please, turn it off. We didn't mean any of it. It was just jokes." "Jokes," I echoed bitterly. "Jokes that cost me thousands. Jokes that made me take on debt while you drank wine in my living room. Jokes that made me feel like less than human." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Dad tried again, his tone hard. "Enough of this. You let us in right now, or what?" I snapped. "You'll break down the door?" "Go ahead. The cameras are rolling. The cops will love watching you commit property damage." His jaw tightened. He stepped back. Rachel's mascara streaked down her cheeks as she shouted, "You're ruining my engagement! Do you know how humiliating this is?" I laughed, a sharp sound that surprised even me. "Humiliating? That's rich coming from you. I was humiliated for years, Rachel, played for a fool while you all fed on my sacrifices. Today isn't about ruining your party. It's about ending mine." The caterer, still standing awkwardly with trays of food balanced in her arms, finally spoke up. "So, should I just load this back in the van?" I nearly choked on my laughter. Mom snapped at her. "No, just wait!" But the poor woman rolled her eyes and started packing up anyway. Guests began trickling back to their cars, shaking their heads. Daniel's father muttered something about irresponsibility before slamming his door. Margaret and Stephen avoided Mom's gaze entirely, faces pale. Within minutes, the driveway that had been full of chatter was a graveyard of awkward silence, littered with wilting roses and unopened champagne bottles. I watched it all from my kitchen table, sipping the last of my coffee like it was champagne. Finally, Mom's voice came back through the phone, brittle and desperate. "Vanessa, honey, can't we talk about this like adults? Just let us in, please." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said quietly. "You showed me who you are. Today, I showed you who I am now." I hung up, tossed the phone onto the counter, and let the silence wash over me. On the security feed, I watched them slowly gather their things, loading decorations and trays back into cars, Rachel sobbing into Daniel's chest. My parents moved stiffly, like puppets whose strings had finally been cut. When the last car pulled out of the driveway, leaving the bags of shredded decorations still piled in the corner like funeral offerings, I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, shaking breath. It was done, and for the first time in my life, I was the one who had left them out in the cold. The morning after the ruined party, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Not the polite kind of knock. This was the kind that rattled the frame, fueled by rage. I already knew who it was. Through the peephole, I saw them, my mother, my father, and Rachel. Their faces were drawn tight with fury, Rachel's makeup smudged from the tears she'd shed the night before. Daniel was nowhere in sight. I steadied my breath, switched on the small recording device I'd hidden on a shelf near the entryway camera, and unlocked the door. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. Dad shoved past me without hesitation, his boots heavy on my hardwood floors. Mom followed, her voice shrill. "We need to talk, Vanessa." Rachel barreled in last, her voice already cracking. "You ruined everything!" I closed the door calmly, leaned against it and crossed my arms. "Funny, I thought you ruined everything yourselves. I just let the world watch." Rachel spun on me, eyes wild. "My engagement party is destroyed. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Daniel's boss was there, his parents. They think I'm a joke now." "You're worried about your reputation?" I tilted my head. "After laughing about how stupid I am in my own house? After draining me dry for years?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Dad stepped forward, his finger jabbing the air between us. "You went too far, Vanessa. You had no right to lock us out of that house." "That house," I shot back, my voice like glass, "is mine. My name is on the deed. My money pays the bills. You all treat it like a free event center while I foot the cost." Mom's voice cracked, equal parts anger and desperation. "We're family. Families share. Families help each other." "Help?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "Help is when it goes both ways. You never helped me. You only took. You manipulated me, mocked me, and called it love." Rachel stepped closer, her face blotchy, tears threatening again. "You owe us, Vanessa. You owe you?" I cut her off, my voice sharp enough to stop her mid-word. "I owe you nothing. Not for your rent, not for your fake tears, not for your fairy tale wedding. The only thing I owe you is honesty, and you finally got it last night." For a moment the room was silent but for Rachel's ragged breathing. Dad broke it, his voice heavy with disdain. "You've lost your mind. After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done? I snapped. My voice rose, years of silence cracking wide open. Let's list it, shall we? You guilted me into keeping the lake house so you could have a vacation spot. You begged for money for fake emergencies. You drained my savings while you laughed about me behind my back. That's what you've done. I pointed toward the camera, blinking quietly in the corner. And now, everyone will see the truth. Because I'm not just telling my side. I've got receipts. Mom's eyes darted to the device, her face paling. You wouldn't. I would, I said evenly. And I already have. Rachel collapsed onto my couch, burying her face in her hands. This isn't fair, she sobbed. All I wanted was one special day. Her words should have softened me, but they didn't. Instead, I felt the weight of every special day I had given up for them. Birthdays I spent wiring money, holidays I spent alone while they celebrated in my house without me. You had your special days, I said quietly. All of them, at my expense. Yesterday was the first day that was mine. Mom reached for me then, her voice trembling. Vanessa, please. We didn't mean to hurt you. You're twisting everything. I stepped back, out of her reach. No, Mom. You meant exactly what you said. I didn't twist your words. You did. You twisted my love, my guilt, my loyalty. You twisted me. Her lips trembled, but no defense came. Dad straightened, jaw set. If you don't apologize and pay us back the money we spent on that party, then we're done. We won't speak to you again. The silence that followed was almost serene. I let it hang, savoring the emptiness of his threat. Then I smiled, slow, deliberate. Perfect, I said softly. That saves me the trouble of cutting you out myself. For the first time since they'd barged in, they looked stunned. Mom's face crumpled, Rachel's tears froze midstream, and Dad's bravado faltered. I moved toward the door, opening it wide. You wanted an answer? Here it is. I don't want your version of family anymore. Take your anger, take your demands, and get out of my apartment. Nobody moved. Now, I added, my tone sharp. Dad muttered a curse under his breath, brushing past me toward the hallway. Mom followed, eyes shiny with unshed tears. Rachel lingered a moment longer, her gaze pleading. Vanessa, she whispered, we're still sisters. I held her stare, my chest heavy but unyielding. No, Rachel, sisters don't treat each other like prey, not anymore. She crumbled then, stumbling out the door. The lock clicked shut behind them, leaving silence in their wake. I leaned against the door, my legs trembling. The confrontation had left me raw, but also strangely lighter, like I'd finally cut loose a weight that had been dragging me under for years. I turned toward the camera, the little red light still blinking, proof that every word was captured, proof that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't crazy. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their fool. I felt free. The door clicked shut behind them, the echo still hanging in the hallway long after their footsteps faded. I stood there with my palm pressed against the wood, my chest heaving, my mind buzzing. The apartment was quiet again, eerily quiet, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt claimed. I walked back to the living room and sat down slowly, the camera light blinking at me from the shelf. Every word, every insult, every demand, they were all there, preserved. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the version of family they preached was nothing but a scam. I thought back to Dad's ultimatum. If you don't pay us back, we're done. For years, those words would have terrified me. Being cut off from them would have felt like exile, like being set adrift. But now it sounded like freedom. That night, I wrote a letter. Not the kind they could twist or argue with, no explanations, no apologies, no space for manipulation, just clarity. I will not give you another cent. I will not allow you into my homes, my accounts, or my life. The locks are changed, the line is drawn, and it is permanent. Don't call, don't come, don't try to use family as a leash anymore. Whatever bond we had, you severed it yourselves. This is me simply acknowledging the cut. I sealed it in 3 envelopes, addressed one to my parents, one to Rachel, and one to Margaret. The act felt like writing obituaries. The following morning, I went for a walk along the Chicago Riverwalk. It was brisk, the kind of cold that wakes every nerve. I watched families pass by, kids bundled in coats, couples holding hands. A pang tugged at me, but not the usual envy. It was recognition. I hadn't lost a family that cherished me. I had lost leeches who drained me. My phone buzzed again and again, but I left it in my pocket. When I got home, I blocked their numbers. For good. That evening, I opened my laptop and logged into a forum I'd followed quietly for years, a place where people shared stories of betrayal and survival. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I began typing. I didn't use their names, but I told the truth. About the house, the money, the laughter, the way they called me their golden goose. I wasn't looking for pity. I just wanted to put the truth into words, to rip it out of me and lay it bare. By the time I hit post, my hands were shaking. Within an hour, replies began to flood in. Strangers telling me I wasn't alone, people calling me brave, strong, an inspiration for walking away. A few even admitted they'd been through the same thing and never found the courage to break free. I leaned back in my chair, tears prickling my eyes. This was the family I had been searching for. Not the people who shared my blood, but the ones who understood my pain and honored my choice to rise from it. As the night settled in, I stood on my balcony, looking out over the city lights. The air was cold against my face, but my chest felt warm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I didn't feel like prey or a puppet or an ATM. I felt unchained, and I promised myself I will never go back. 2 months after the final severance, I drove back to Lake Geneva alone. The snow had melted, the lake shimmered with early spring light, and the house stood tall at the end of the gravel road, silent, waiting. I parked and stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots echoing like a reminder. This is yours. The locks clicked open with the new keys, smooth and secure. I stepped inside, bracing myself for ghosts of the past. But instead of balloons, banners, and false laughter, there was quiet. The walls didn't echo with betrayal anymore, they hummed with possibility. I ran my fingers along the mantel where that congratulatory banner had once hung. This time, instead of tearing something down, I imagined building something up. That week, I signed a contract with a local agency to list the house as a vacation rental. At first, it was practical, a way to offset my Chicago mortgage. But as inquiries poured in, families booking weekends, couples reserving the lake house for anniversaries, I realized it was more than money. It was reclamation. The same space my family had used to belittle me was now bringing joy to strangers, people who respected it, paid for it, valued it. Each reservation felt like a brick in the wall I was rebuilding around my life, one that only I had the key to. But I didn't stop there. On weekends, when the house wasn't booked, I began inviting people who needed a break. Co-workers overwhelmed by city life, a single mom from my office, even a woman I met online who'd escaped a toxic relationship. I didn't charge them. I just handed them the keys and said, "Rest. Heal. This place is safe." One evening, sitting by the fire pit with that single mom, her daughter roasting marshmallows while she stared at the stars, she whispered, "You have no idea how much this means. Nobody's ever done this for us." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I think I do," I said softly, "because I know what it feels like when nobody does." In giving the house new meaning, I was giving myself new meaning too. My story online had spread farther than I expected. The post I'd written about manipulation, betrayal, and finally breaking free had been shared thousands of times. Messages flooded my inbox, strangers thanking me for saying the words they couldn't, for showing them it was possible to walk away. At first, it overwhelmed me. But then I realized this was my chance to turn pain into power. I started writing regularly, small essays about boundaries, about saying no, about the strange relief of choosing yourself. Some were raw, others hopeful. Slowly, people began to see me not as the foolish daughter my family had painted, but as something else, proof that healing was possible. One Saturday, standing on the porch at Lake Geneva, I looked out over the water. The sun shimmered across the waves and a breeze carried the faint scent of pine. I remembered standing there months ago, tears streaming, clutching pastries I'd brought as an offering to people who would never appreciate me. Now I stood taller. Alone, yes, but whole. My phone buzzed with another message, a young woman thanking me for inspiring her to leave a controlling relationship. I smiled. This was my rebirth. Not loud, not glamorous, but steady. The house wasn't a burden anymore. It wasn't a cage. It was mine, and through it I'd found a way to give myself and others something my family never gave me: dignity. That night, sitting by the fire inside, I whispered aloud, just to hear it spoken. They don't own me anymore. They never will again. The flames crackled in answer, warm against my face. Looking back, I realize the hardest chains to break aren't the ones others put on us. They're the ones we fasten ourselves, believing love means sacrifice without limits. For years, I wore those chains, telling myself that giving was proof of worth. But the truth, worth doesn't come from being drained by others. It comes from standing firm and saying, enough. My family's betrayal hurt more than I can describe, but it also gave me clarity. They showed me exactly what I was to them, and in doing so, they pushed me to finally ask what I wanted to be for myself. Now I see the beauty in boundaries. I see the strength in saying no. I see that real family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, love, and reciprocity. And if you're listening, carrying your own chains, I want you to know, you can break them too. You're not foolish for loving, but you are powerful when you stop letting that love be exploited. If my story resonates with you, don't let it end here. Press like, subscribe, share it with someone who needs courage today, and tell me your story in the comments. Together, we can remind each other, healing is possible and rebirth is real.